Hello. I present to you a snow globe. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to put something else in the snow globe. And I'm going to show you how you can use one of the brushes, one of the special effects brushes that comes with Photoshop to create some snow inside the snow globe. So let's get started. All right, the first thing we're going to do is go to File, Open. And I have two snow globe images. They're both camera raw files. One is with kind of a Christmassy day background, and the other one is more of a studio shot. You can use either one. I'm going to go ahead and use the studio one. Let's go ahead and open that. And I'm not going to make any changes here. I'm going to simply hit Open Image. And the first thing I want to do is I want to cut the birds out because I'm going to replace that with something else in here. So I'm going to make a copy of this layer by dragging it down to the new layer icon here. I can also do that by hitting Command J. All right, let's zoom in here. And what I want to do is I want to make a selection of this gray background area. So let's just go ahead and do that. And let's go ahead and use the pen tool. I generally like using the pen tool because it has a lot of control and of curves and so forth. So when you select the pen tool, you want to make sure you're on path up here as opposed to shape. That way it won't make a new layer. And to use the pen tool, simply click again, and then to determine the curve shape, what you're going to do is click and drag. And then once you've made it, the curve is going to continue from this handle unless you click on the anchor point holding down Option. And that's going to cut off the tail so that your next curve is not going to be affected by the last one. And I want to just go around here. I want to cut out this as well. So I'm going to kind of go around here all the way down to here. And I'm just clicking, dragging, clicking, dragging, clicking, dragging. Doesn't have to be super accurate for this. And let's go back up here. And we're going to go around this thing. And here it's obviously not as important. And that looks good. So now that I have my path, I can right mouse click and say Make Selection. We'll keep the feathering on 0. And then we're going to make a new layer. And using a large brush, so I hit B to go on the brush tool, and I'm going to use one of the general brushes. I'm going to use this one here, which is a very smooth brush. And then by holding Control and Option, I can adjust the size and the feather of my brush. So up and down is going to adjust the hardness of the feather, and side to side is going to adjust the diameter. And then by holding down Option, I can select a color here and then start painting out the birds. And I can also reselect my color so that there's some variation. I can also adjust my opacity here just so that my various colors blend on top of each other a little bit better for a more realistic effect here. And I'm just going to swipe this over and over until our birds are gone from the image. And that's looking pretty good there. Paint myself out of there too, out of the reflection there. And now let's do Command D to get rid of that selection so we don't have a hard edge there. And that looks quite good. Okay, so now we've cut that out. The next thing I want to do is go File, Open, and you'll see this Linny Sandback image of a fox. So now the next thing I want to do is I want to cut out this fox from the background. And there's a lot of different ways to make selections in Photoshop, and they keep adding new ones. For this one, because the fox is in focus and the background is out of focus, I can actually use the select focus area to select this out of the background. So let's go ahead and see just what the default looks like. Pretty good. And what I can do is I can, by holding down Option, you can see my brush is changing there from a plus to a minus. I can also change it here if I don't want to hold down the shortcut, but I always prefer shortcuts. So I'm going to hold down Option, paint this area. And let's do the same on this side. And you can see it's kind of recognizing the whole area of focus that you click on. And there it's getting a little close to that leg. And overall, for a one-click tool, this is doing a pretty good job of selecting this out. So let's hit OK. And next, what I'm going to do is go onto any of my selection tools. So in this case, I can hit L for the lasso tool, and that's going to bring up this button here, Select and Mask. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And these tools, this is to add or subtract from your selection. So in this case, and I can also adjust the opacity of my overlay, and the color of it, by the way. I think the default is red or green. I believe it's a red color. In this case, because I have an orange fox, I want something that'll contrast nicely with that. So I'm going to pick more of a cyany color there. And let's take it down. There you go. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go paint in what areas of the fox the selection did not pick, and I'm using the Add minus to selection tool there. And that's doing a pretty good job there. Hold down Option if you want to subtract. Some of this it looks like I'm going to have to do by hand, but that's doing a pretty good job. So this is Refine Edge, and you can see by the icon that it's really made for hair. And by just brushing the edge here, what I'm going to do is select those hairs from the background. So this is a great tool for selecting either people with hair or animals with fur. So let's go ahead and paint along the entire edge of this. As you can see, it's doing a really good job of separating those hairs out from the background. Now, this tool does not do great when there's a hard separation, but obviously in the case of this fox, the whole thing is fur-based, so it's doing quite a good job there. All right, that looks quite good. So let's go down here, and what I want to do is I want to turn on the Smart Radius, put that on about 3 pixels, and then here I want to output to a layer mask. So let's go ahead, actually a new layer with layer mask. So let's hit OK. And there you can see what that looks like. And we can also, by hitting Option and clicking on the mask, we can see the mask independent of the image, and then we can see what we need to clean up. So in this case, we can see up here we need to clean that up. And by going on the mask and going on the brush tool, which is B, let's turn up the opacity to 100. And then essentially painting black is going to make our item disappear from our selection or from our mask. And painting white is going to add it back in. Here, on white. And if we want, we can also take this background layer, make a copy of it and take the opacity down. That's if we want to see. I guess it's going to help actually to have a white layer here. So with my black and white defaults there, I'm going to hold down Command Delete, which is going to fill that layer with the background color. Let's go here just so we can see what's underneath. And then when we go back on this mask, see a little bit better what we're doing here when we're painting this in. And that looks quite nice. Now let's turn that off. This here, which we don't need. Just make sure we're on the mask. Always make sure you're on the mask. Otherwise you're actually painting on the image. Still not on the mask. There you go. And X is the shortcut to switch those two colors, by the way. So when you're painting, if you accidentally paint too much, just hit X and then you can paint it back. That looks pretty nice. Let's go ahead, clean this up a little bit here as well. That looks quite good. Alright, now I'm going to make my brush a little bit bigger, not as soft, and just kind of hit out this area here. I don't mind going down because I'm going to crop out the bottom, but I don't want it showing up at the top or on either side there. So something along these lines is good. Alright, so now we have our fox cut out. What we're going to do is we're going to make this a smart object by right mouse clicking and converting it to a smart object, and then we're going to drag it into our image here, and then with Command T we can place that. Let's put the fox right about there. Looks like a nice spot for him. And I want this bottom part to show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to make a selection. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to put a mask on that guy. Make a selection, invert my selection, and then on this, go with black, paint out the bottom. There you go, just so it looks like it's behind as opposed to in front. Like so. Alright, and we noticed this little remnants of the bird, so let's get rid of that. We're going to go on the background layer here, go on the stamp tool, select down here, and just paint. Opacity's on 50, let's put that on 100 for now. Just want to paint up, get rid of that. And we can take the opacity down just so we don't have these repeats here. We'll just hit those. That so it doesn't look like it's repeating image. There you go, that looks not too bad. Alright, so now we have our fox in place. Now what we want to do, oops. Okay, so I want to move the fox a bit, but this mask element is already in place. I'm going to unlock that, so I'm just moving the fox right about there. We can nudge him with our arrow keys. So I think that looks quite good. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to take this reflection here and I want to put it in front of the fox so that we get the impression that the fox is inside the glass. So let's go ahead and turn off these top two layers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my pen tool, which is P. I'm going to make a selection that's similar in shape to this whiteboard reflection in here. So something along those lines. Let's go ahead and make a selection there. Make a new layer. Go on my gradient, which is G. Go on a radial gradient, make my foreground color white, make sure I'm on foreground color to transparent on the gradients. And I'm just going to make a gradient from here. And then I'm going to nest that or group it to our fox layer there, and then just turn down the opacity. So there you go. That's enough. So right away, this looks more like he's inside the glass now. I also want to add some shadow down here, because obviously the light's coming primarily from this direction. You can tell by the shadows and the light on the bottom elements here and on this. So the light source is up here, so we want to make this a little darker. So I'm going to go ahead and add another nested layer there. Go back on my brush, switch my brush to black, make my brush bigger and more and completely feathered, and then just kind of paint in this area here, down here, and put this on soft light. It's going to just shade that area darker. And I can also do one more layer that's on normal and just hit those very bottom areas there, so they kind of fall back into even more shadow there. Like that. The other thing I want to do is add just a little bit of light behind here. So I'm going to go ahead and let's call this glow. We can call this bird cover. And let's call this fox. Try to keep our layers a little bit more organized here. Alright, so in my glow layer, I'm going to go back on the gradient. It's already on radial. I'm going to pick this kind of lighter color here and do that, and then put this on screen. Now, every blending mode has a shortcut, which is Shift, Option, and a letter. So, it's definitely good to know those. The one for screen is Shift, Option, S. Alright, so we can see what that looks like. I like it here. Here we're getting this little halo effect, which I'm not crazy about. So let's turn this down a bit. And let's put a mask on it. Go to a gradient. And let's just mask that out there and there. So it's primarily hitting that spot where it's helping there. Yeah, I think that looks good. Alright, next thing I want to do is change his eye color, so we're getting a little more contrast out of him, and also just to look more interesting. Alright, so let's call this eye color. Let's zoom in here. And let's pick a blue color from right there. That looks pretty good. We're going to make this brush significantly smaller. We're just going to paint in the eye, and I'm going to try to not hit the parts that aren't orange. That looks pretty good. And let's, for now, turn off the reflection. Let's do the other eye as well. Good. So that looks quite good. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this and put it on color. There you go. Let's turn that reflection back on. That looks quite nice. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make his eyes a bit brighter. To do that, I'm going to add another layer. I'm going to call this eye highlights. This is a great trick for human eyes too. What you're going to do is just take white and paint a little arch under the pupil like that, and put that on overlay. And we can take it down. That there looks good. And we are getting kind of a double from the reflection is making that eye overlay quite a lot brighter. So what we can do is we can put the reflection on top so it's not affecting that eye color. There you have it. That looks quite nice. Alright, next thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit of flares to some of our lights. So let's go File, Place Embedded, and we're going to pick the flare, and let's put that on screen. And you can see this flare has fine detail here, a little bit too fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to blur it just a little bit, just to get rid of those hard lines there. So probably right about there is good. So 7 pixels. All right, now what we can do is place this flare where we want it. So we can place it here, and that looks quite nice. Now the problem is you can see it's cutting off here. So what I'm going to do is add a mask on there, go in a black gradient, and just kind of gradient toward the center like that. So that looks quite nice. I actually like that, even though I wouldn't have it repeated. All right, so let's go ahead and make a copy, Command J. Let's put that on here, and on this one, I'm going to go in my mask, and with a large black brush, just brush that out. That looks quite nice. And we can do one last one there, and then maybe add one here. All right, let's delete the layer mask on this one. Kind of ta-da one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mask on there, and I'm going to do a radial that goes out from the center of the flare to about there. And then I'm going to invert that mask. There you go. All right, the next thing I want to do is add some grunge and texture to the whole image. So let's go File, Place Embedded, pick Grunge 02. So just going to put that and then put it on Soft Light. And Soft Light is Shift Option F. And let's take the opacity down on that a lot. So even 3 is giving us some nice texture back here, nice texture on here. Probably even go a little lower. And I don't want to add the color of this, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Shift Option Command B to turn it black and white. So we're just adding texture, not color. All right, now let's go File, Place Embedded again. And we're going to pick Grunge 01. And we're going to do the same thing. Make it the size of the document. Shift Option F. And you can see also this one is kind of adding a nice vignette because the layer itself is vignetted. All right, so let's put this one on 60 is quite nice there. And finally, let's do Place Embedded Lomo Film 5. And let's turn this around. There you go. And let's put that on Soft Light. There, and that's giving us that nice frame effect. And let's see. Looks like, yeah, that's pretty nice. Okay, so all these layers actually, let's put them in a group and let's put call this texture, because the one other thing I want to do is I want to add some snow in here. To do that, the first thing we need to do is make a mask of the globe. Now, fortunately, it's a glass globe, so it's going to be a perfect circle. So we can use our circle ellipse tool and just start from kind of a visual center, start dragging out and hold down Option so it drags out from the center there. I'm also holding down Shift, but in the new version of Photoshop, you don't have to hold Shift anymore, I believe. It's very confusing, which is why I changed mine back. All right, now we can do Transform Selection. Oh, hang on, yeah. You want to go Transform Selection. Don't need. Okay, so now what we can do is just drag it and match our circle perfectly. I'm going to be selecting the outside of our globe here. That side looks quite good. A little bit here. Good, that looks good, that looks good. Okay, So now we have a circle, but we want to cut out this bottom part. But if I start making a new selection, I'm going to lose my circle. So that's where Q, the shortcut Q for quick mask, comes into play. So by clicking on Q, I've turned my selection into a temporary alpha channel, which if you go to channels, you can see it there. All right, and now I can use my brush tools. I can use other tools like the selection tools without losing my selection. And I can go in here, select out the base of this glass, fill that in. And there you go. Now I have just the glass selected. I can hit Q again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a alpha channel. Fill that with white, and we're going to call this glass, just in case I need to use the selection again in the future. Okay, and to select it again, I can just hold down Command and click on glass. But I don't need that quite yet, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a snow layer. Okay, and to make the snow, we're going to go to our brush tool, and one of the default Photoshop brushes, if you go to special effects brushes in your brushes palette, you'll see you've got these nice snow effects which you can use, and these come with Photoshop. So let's select this one and let's see how it looks. It's a little too small, so let's Command Z that, make our brush a little bigger, a little too big. So I'm just kind of playing with it here. That looks about right. Okay, so now generally in snow globes, the snow's going to tend toward the bottom. So I kind of want to go like that, a little bit more at the bottom, and then have some up here as well. Not too much. And definitely more at the bottom. So there you go. That looks quite good. Let's go to our channels, select our glass alpha channel, and add a mask. And there you go. Now we've contained all of our snow in here. And the next thing I want to do, because obviously the glass, the snow will stay contained within the glass. This is going right to the outside, almost like the outside of the glass is painted. We don't want that. But I also don't want to change this mask. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in a group. This is kind of a trick to double mask something. Put it in a group and then mask the group. So now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on a brush tool. I got to select my basic brush there again. And I'm just going to on my mask, I'm just going to paint out the edge here. Why is this not working? Oh, because I'm on the erase tool. There you go, brush tool. And why is it? Oh, because that's an eraser brush. That's why. Okay, let's go to general brushes. There you go. All right, so now I've got that selected. Longest brush selection ever. All right, there you go. Now what we can do is just paint out the edge. So any of those snowflakes hitting the edge there, I'm just going to paint out. And that looks quite good. Now I also don't want any directly in his face, so I'm just going to paint a couple of those out. I do want a few on top of his body, so it looks like he's inside. That looks quite good. Oh, now one other thing I want to do. Okay, let's wrap up the snow. So there you go. That's the simplicity of making some snow in there. That looks really good. One other thing I do want to do, however, is because the light's coming this way, we have this shadow kind of on the wrong side of the fox's face. Obviously the light on the fox is coming from, you know, kind of up here down, so we're getting the shadow here and a little bit on this side, whereas I want the shadow to look like it's coming here. So what I want to do is I want to add a shadow of his nose here. So how do we do that? And I'm going to show you. So let's go first. Let's just open. We're going to do it in here as opposed to our main document. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a layer. And with my marquee here, just going to make a selection around his nose. Like that. And I'm going to do select and mask, and I'm going to turn on the smart radius just so that we get a little bit of selection around the fur there. Looks good. All right, then I'm going to invert that selection, and we're going to call this layer shadow. And let's just start with black because we can always change the color of it later. So just kind of like this, as if that shadow is coming from his face down. That's probably a bit too big. Let's go in our eraser here and just erase it there. That looks pretty good. And let's put this on multiply. Take the opacity down. Okay, so now here's the trick. That looks terrible. Obviously, how do we make it look a little more realistic? And to do that, I'm going to double click on the layer here and bring up the blending options. And what I'm going to do is go on, whoops. All right, I'm going to go on underlying layer. Sorry, underlying layer. And I want to move this here so that we get the hair coming past through the shadow. So all of a sudden that looks a lot more realistic, but it's clipping. So I'm going to hold down Option, separate these two, oops, like this, so we can get a more smooth transition. And we can also adjust the opacity here. And there you go. So that looks like a relatively realistic shadow there that's being added. So let's go ahead and close this. There you go. So that looks a little bit better. And we have our snow. Now we have our texture. And the last thing I want to do is color grade. So the first thing I want to do with for the color grading is I'm going to add a gradient map. And I want my gradient map to have a very blue, wintry color on one end and kind of a warm, this kind of fox's color on the other end, but a little bit more golden. So about there. So now by making my blue to gold here, when I create my gradient map, it's going to use those colors. And then I'm going to change the gradient map to soft light. And you can see right away we've color graded the entire image. That looks quite good. I think the blue's a little too saturated. So let's just move that here. I do like the saturation, but not quite that much. So about there looks good. And I think the yellow is probably a little too saturated as well. That looks pretty good. Okay, good. All right, then the next thing I want to do is add a curves layer. We're just going to pump up the lights a bit, take the darks down a bit. And another thing I like to do to give it kind of a vintage look is go into your blue channel, bring up the bottom, and bring down the top. And you can see what that does. It gives it a nice kind of a look there. I might even want to do that more actually. Bring up the blue more so we have more of a wintry look there like that. I like that. And I want to highlight the edges of this globe just to separate it out from the background more. I feel we're kind of losing it a little bit. So let's go ahead and go to our channels, select our glass again, and make a new layer. And I'm going to go to a radial gradient, make my foreground color white, and make one gradient from here, one gradient there, and put those on overlay. There you go, we're kind of defining that circle shape a little better there. Turn that down just a bit. It's quite good. All right, and I want a little bit more vignette on the whole thing, so I'm going to go ahead and add a new layer. Go on a gradient, black, and just kind of gradient in the sides here. That's just going to draw more attention into the center by adding a vignette there. And finally, I want to make the fox more vibrant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a vibrance layer, really pump that up, and pump up some saturation. Oop, not overboard. About there, looks quite nice. And I'm going to fill in the entire mask with black, go on a large brush, white, just paint in the fox. That looks quite nice. And then the last thing I want to do is I want to add sharpness to the whole image. But I don't want the texture to affect that sharpness. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the texture layer, add a new layer at the very top, hold down Shift, Option, Command E, which is going to make a copy of all your layers into a single layer. Then we're going to go to Filter, Other, High Pass. And yeah, probably 3 pixels is good. And then we can put that on overlay. You can see what it does. It adds sharpness to the whole image. And let's turn our texture back on. And there you go. I kind of like that. If anything, I'd probably crop it in a bit. So let's crop it in. Yeah, there you go. That looks quite nice. And yeah, I'm happy with that. All right, there you have it. If you look into the description of this video, you'll see all the assets you need to create this composite on your own. So go ahead and you can download the assets there. I do ask that you sign up for my newsletter, which means you will be notified of new tutorials, discounts on my courses, as well as other free assets and stuff. I don't share your email with anyone else, so yeah, all you have to do is sign up for my newsletter and you can get all the assets. And if you don't want to do that, that's totally fine. Just follow along and you can still learn everything in this video without having to download anything. Beyond that, please subscribe to my channel and happy photoshopping. Until next time. I'm going to let this creepy snow globe play while you see the other videos you can check out.